Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Friday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing wonderful out there this morning and having a great start to your day and a great beginning to your weekend out there. Here to break down the latest on what's going to happen weather-wise for your Friday. We'll extend this a little bit into our Saturday also for certain areas of the country. All in all, not a super active day. We do run a risk of strong to severe storms for a pretty large area of like the middle of the country, especially like the northern plains and the high plains, places like that. So we'll speak on that, but not heavily, just because it's just a very large marginal risk. This could get upgraded to a slight, but I think tomorrow starts a pretty active 3 or 4 day stretch of severe weather for the upper portion of the lower 48. And with that being said, we will speak on kind of what's driving that in the second half of the video towards the end. And of course, we will give you an update on the tropics, but folks, I really think the tropics are going to be quiet for at least the next 2 weeks. Now, that being said, I've said stuff like that in regards to severe weather, thinking we were going to enter a quieter period, and then 2 days later, we're tracking something substantial, but I really don't see anything that's trackable out there in the tropics for now. So let's just enjoy that quieter period because it's not going to last forever, that's for sure. So we'll speak on all that. But all in all, this is probably going to be a quicker video. It's a nice break, a breath of fresh air with these 30 to 40, 45 minutes videos that we've been dealing with over the last 2 or 3 weeks. My videos are very long, but this one should be rather short when you compare it to the last 2 weeks of videos. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it, and if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below so I can pray over it and so others can do so too, guys. That's huge. If it's unspoken, put that. If anybody needs anybody to talk to, hit me up on social media. There's a lot of lonely people out there, a lot of people going through stuff, don't have nobody to talk to. So I'm always here to lend an ear. Hit me up on my email, especially in these slower times. I have a little bit more time to certainly talk to you guys, a little bit more detail. When it's crazy, just absolutely nuts, I try to acknowledge everybody, but I can't get as detailed as I want to. So it's a slower period, so hit me up. So, yeah, let's get rocking and rolling. So a lot of rain, a lot of tropical-like moisture is surging into the Carolinas, and a lot of this is sort of stationary. It's pivoting in, kind of setting shop in one area. It was doing that yesterday, too. We had numerous flash flood warnings, doing it again in some of the same similar regions, but we do have a nice band setting up kind of in the PD of South Carolina, areas of central North Carolina, not quite to Charlotte, but certainly about an hour or two like east of Charlotte. Definitely Raleigh's getting some rain. We're getting some rain surging all the way up into Long Island right now, starting to kind of nip the areas of Southeast Mass and Rhode Island. Maybe is eventually going to get into like the shoreline of Connecticut. So we are going to zoom into this area, talk a little bit more heavily on that, how much rain could fall over the next 2 days or so. Got some moisture dancing around down here in the southern sections of Florida. The HRRR model picked up on this pretty well yesterday morning. It's doing pretty well verifying this morning. So you guys are definitely getting a good bit of rain down here. We got some moisture hugging the immediate Texas coastline, definitely waking up with some rain showers, some tropical rain, some downpours. Embedded energy right here where kind of Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas kind of come together here. Some flash flood warnings. There's actually a severe thunderstorm warning south of Columbia, Missouri. So some of these storms are packing a punch. A little bit of moisture dancing around lower Michigan. And we do have some energy that's already kind of pivoting around this ridge, this upper ridge of high pressure out west. You can actually see it, a little bit of the spin. If you look really closely here, you got some action. I don't know how much of this is actually hitting the ground in the southwest. I would bet a lot of it isn't, but maybe some of it is. We got some energy kind of moving this way. And then up here in Canada, you see energy kind of moving west to east. And then you see energy dropping south right here. So you can see that it's pivoting around something, and that is our upper ridging, as we do have that anticyclonic flow turning around this ridge of high pressure. So I would have tried to draw on this, but I just remember I don't have my Epic pen up. I got to remember to pull that up so when I need to draw, so I don't have to do that on the fly. I know that gets kind of annoying having to pause the video like that, but watches, warnings, and advisories. Finally, pivotal weather's acting right for us. Flood watches, rightfully so, up for eastern North Carolina, areas of the PD of South Carolina. This doesn't include like Horry County. You guys are under a flood watch. Could get a good bit of rain today. These flood watches extend all the way up through the Delmarva. Southeastern PA, New Jersey, southern New York. Does include New York City. all the way into areas of southern sections of New England. So a few inches of rain's on the way. We got flood watches up, so a good bit of rain could fall over the next 36 hours. Heat advisories, once again, where you guys are trying to clean up down here in Texas, right where the path of Beryl went through. Heat and humidity certainly going to be the storyline once again today, with some on and off showers and downpours being possible. Heat advisories up from Montana through Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado. Definitely seeing the influences of this high pressure setting up shop pretty much over the entire Rockies, the western U.S. It's very hot. I mean, it's going to get into the upper 90s, the low 100s across the high plains, northern plains, and it just continues to be just very hot across the western U.S. in general. I mean, just highs are a good bit above average. Nothing too wild, I would say, but it is very hot out here. It continues to be as high pressure continues to dominate your pattern. We do have some excessive heat watches around Omaha and Lincoln, so could get upgraded to advisories or excessive heat warnings, as a lot of this heat is going to shift east. In fact, it's going to be a very hot day across the deep south, just not heat advisory criteria heat, if that makes sense. So excessive rainfall outlook. Same areas that are seeing the rain right now have that slight risk in the yellow. That is at least a 15% chance. You see right here, 15% chance of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance within 25 miles of any given location. So if anybody's going to get flash flooding today, it's going to happen in these areas, and there are flash flood warnings ongoing right now. So Storm Prediction Center. Not a big day for severe weather, but a very large area. Pretty much all of the Dakotas, you can basically say. Almost all of Nebraska, oozing all the way down into northern sections of Kansas. This does include eastern areas of Montana, extreme eastern areas of Wyoming and northeastern Colorado. It does have a level 1 out of 5 risk of severe weather, a marginal risk, but I would say 75% of this area won't even get a drop of rain today. It's very isolated, just looking at model guidance, but we will talk about that a little bit once we get to the north central frame. But everybody else in the light green, just a general risk of thunderstorms. And zooming in on the southeast, we'll take a broad look first, actually. And we'll roll through over the next 24 hours. Really, the storyline is just a ton of moisture surging north, from south to north throughout the areas of the Carolinas, up into Virginia, Delmarva. There's going to be a sharp cutoff somewhere in the central areas of the Carolinas, unfortunately, where some people just won't get any rain. And I think that'll be my neck of the woods, where the rain will kind of stop about an hour east of my area. Luckily, we picked up a little bit of rain over the last couple weeks, enough to kind of get everything back green again, but we certainly continue to need to rain, as we actually have a pretty significant drought in place for areas of South Carolina, especially the PD. So all this rain we're going to get today is very beneficial, but we're going to continue just to get these downpours, kind of the same pattern we've seen over the last couple weeks in Louisiana. Some downpours in the southern half of Louisiana, southern Mississippi, near Mobile, Alabama too. We'll continue to get tropical downpours down here in Florida. These won't pack much of a punch. It's just a lot of heavy rain, typical summer type thunderstorms, nothing spring-like where we're getting tornadoes or anything like that. Very just tropical air mass. So column super saturated, no real dry air aloft, nothing to really drive a severe weather threat. But obviously you probably are going to get some severe thunderstorm warnings, just nothing that's high end, I would say. But this rain will continue to dance around to the overnight hours in the eastern sections of the Carolinas and Virginia. Just a little bit closer look at my friends here in the Carolinas and southeastern VA. This morning, HRR model verifying okay. It's totally whiffing on a band of moisture right into here, but it is getting this right, but it's whiffing pretty bad on this area right here that's actually getting rain, actually like west of the Fayetteville area. Showing a little bit, but as we start to get to about midday, this is when we start to see a lot of moisture even into eastern South Carolina. I mean, down here to maybe as far south as Beaufort, all the way up through Orangeburg, Florence. These areas right here in the PD of South Carolina are really under a very bad drought right now. It's extreme in some cases. We need the rain. Hopefully we get a few inches today, but a lot of the heaviest widespread rain will certainly be in the eastern sections of North Carolina, southeast VA. And by the time we get into this afternoon, it's around 5 p.m. It's getting close to Columbia, Charlotte. Does it make it? I don't know. I don't know. Let's hope it does. I would say it's gonna stop just east of Columbia to Charlotte, like just east of 77. But you get about an hour or two east of those areas, widespread showers and storms. You're going to feel like the air mass changes significantly and just widespread rains. I mean, this is getting into this evening. Things might calm down a good bit later this evening, but you could still be dealing with a lot of showers and storms hugging the Carolina coastline all throughout tomorrow morning, and we're probably going to deal with it again tomorrow afternoon. And we might could get some pop-up activity that might give us some much-needed rain in western sections of South Carolina, and we'll just have to see what happens. But between now and just the next 24 hours, there it is. I mean, let's hope that we can get an inch and a half of rain in the PD of South Carolina, but it's a pretty big, sharp cutoff. The National Weather Service kind of throwing a bone to Charlotte and Columbia, but I don't know if anything will actually happen. It's really southeastern VA, and we'll show more areas a little bit further north too for my folks up in the Delmarva. Probably wondering, hey, you gonna show us? I got you in the northeast timestamp. But the eastern areas of the Carolinas, especially North Carolina, I mean, Raleigh, 1 to 2 inches of rain. You get further east, 2 to 3 inches of rain. A lot of rain will fall outside of what you're already seeing this morning, what you saw yesterday. Up here in the northeast, not a whole lot going on for the immediate northeast area. Some pop-up showers and storms are possible really anywhere in the interior northeast. The main storyline is all this moisture kind of surging up I-95 all the way into southern New England. Especially as we get into the overnight hours, we could get a lot more moisture that you're waking up to tomorrow morning in southern New England. This could make it all the way up into Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine also. And we take this all the way into tomorrow afternoon. It's probably going to be a soggy soggy day pretty much for your Saturday across the beaches of the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. Definitely not going to be the best, I would say, beach day by any means. Jersey Shore is probably going to definitely deal with some rain and all those places. So Virginia Beach, rain. But a closer look at my friends here in the mid-Atlantic, up into southern New England area. Here's just a close look at this rain. This is around 4 p.m. I mean, you got storms from North Carolina, Virginia. We really need some of this rain to get into western sections of Virginia. You guys have not seen a whole lot of rain. Hopefully this can work its way a little bit further west than what's modeled. But D.C., Baltimore, maybe up to Philadelphia, but certainly New York City is going to get some storms. Long Island, you'll probably get some rounds of storms this afternoon. Look at all this storm action across the Delmarva, Delaware, Maryland. Probably not near as much in like western Maryland, but we'll see. Then we get to the overnight hours, probably some rain overnight in New York City, and we're going to wake up tomorrow morning with a lot of shower and storm activity again. And I do think by the time we get into tomorrow evening, things will start to quiet on down. But rainfall between now and just clear through Sunday morning. So we'll take this out 48 hours. Bullseye in the Delmarva, areas of Virginia with 2 to 4 inches of rain. All of New Jersey could get a good 1 to 2 inches of rain. New York City could get an inch and a half. Boston, kind of the same thing. But you check out the sharp cutoff. They're not throwing much of a bone to West Virginia, western half of PA, western areas of VA, unfortunately. So, yeah, we'll watch that. Hopefully the rain can get a little bit further west than what's forecast, but I just don't see it happening, especially with there's such a dry air mass, a dry to very tropical air mass kind of gradient in place that's going to really prevent the atmosphere from getting really a lot of moisture in it to get that rain going. But anyways, the south central U.S., we got that energy up in Missouri that's not being modeled very well. Might have some leftover boundaries. In fact, we are going the wrong direction. Here we go. So here we go. Might continue to get some shower and storm action in Missouri, just kind of leftover boundaries in the atmosphere, kind of refiring this energy, providing enough lift. We're going to continue just to get these tropical downpours along the Texas coastline, points inland, maybe an hour or two. Same thing with Louisiana, like mentioned earlier. Could get an area more concentrated kind of shower and storm activity in like extreme southern Texas. So if you live down here, maybe some more widespread storm action is possible for sure down here when you compare it to everybody else. But outside of that, just very isolated activity. It's just kind of a watching to see what happens overnight. And then we wake up tomorrow morning, some energy surging south from the north on the eastern side of this upper ridge to the west. And we could wake up to some shower and storm activity, maybe in Missouri, maybe in Nebraska, that we'll watch out for. The north central U.S., the immediate Great Lakes area, it's a beautiful, nice day. could get an isolated pop-up activity out here in the form of maybe a storm or a downpour. But it's really, we watch what's going to happen in the Dakotas today, where you have a huge marginal risk. But you notice, I mean, we're getting into about 9, 10, 11 o'clock. Nothing's really widespread. I mean, I would say the more heightened area of activity is probably in North Dakota, where I would say more so the western, the central areas of North Dakota is getting some storm activity. Some of this could drift into central South Dakota, like late tonight into tomorrow morning, but it's not very widespread. The models could have this wrong. They could, but even though there's a large marginal risk, it's going to be very hot in this area. So if you do get hit by a storm in this area today, there's going to be plenty of fuel in the atmosphere. It's just, does anything actually fire? Is it going to be widespread is the bigger question here. So if you live in this entire area, be aware of storms, but just know that the chance of you getting hit is pretty low. Just if you get under any kind of warnings, or obviously the sky darkens up, take it serious. And you can really see all this energy kind of pivoting around this ridge. It's hard to see on this map. In fact, I'm going to do this on the fly for you folks here. And just kind of get a little bit more zoomed in look of the Rockies. So let's see, this, that. Yeah, so if you kind of look what happens today, you can see kind of the energy pivoting like around this way. And it's pivoting around an upper ridge of high pressure right here over the Rockies. So we're going to get energy sort of kind of northwest flow, if you will, going through Wyoming. But there's not really any widespread activity anywhere. It could get an isolated downpour, maybe a storm down here in central Arizona. Some of this energy will actually pivot in from east to west in southern sections of California that we'll watch out for. But all in all, you don't have a lot of energy embedded in this mid-level flow wrapping around this upper ridge. So temperatures today, a pretty nice day in the Great Lakes region. 80s. No real weather happening. It's nice. It's a not very nice summer day. Northeast, kind of the same thing, except if you're dealing with the showering storms and cloudy activity. But you get away from that in the inland areas of the Northeast. A nice day in the 70s and 80s. It's starting to get hot again. It's been hot, but the heat's going to begin to flex again in the deep south. I think there'll be a sharp temperature gradient somewhere in South Carolina, North Carolina, where you're dealing with the clouds with this broad area of low pressure bringing all this rain. And then the heat from the ridge starting to influence your pattern a little bit further to the east. But it's going to be pretty hot. I'm into the west. It's going to be pretty hot across the middle of the country. 90s, 100s, all the way up into the high plains. It's getting pretty hot all the way up into Canada. So a lot of fuel in the atmosphere, a lot of heating during the daytime and afternoon, evening hours will be there to fuel any storms that form. It's just, will they get going? Very hot in the western U.S. Hot weather continues. Not as hot as it's been. You're not going to get into probably the low 100s again today and some of the lower elevations of Oregon and valleys of Washington and Idaho. Now, Idaho might be a different story. You might get into the low 100s. Look at Utah. It's very hot still in Nevada, Utah, and then the Southwest. Very, very brutally hot temperatures. The valleys of California, Death Valley, Las Vegas, hot. I don't think it's compared to what you've seen over the last several days, but certainly going to be quite hot out here. So that's today's forecast. Now, if we start to move into tomorrow, this upper ridge continues to be in place. And in fact, we're not going to be able to get away from pulling up my Epic Paint because I'm going to have to draw on this regardless coming up. So let's make sure it's working. Might get a little pop-up here like we always do. There it is, and there it goes. Storm Prediction Center for tomorrow. We do have a slight risk. So for my folks that's tuning in from the north, anywhere from Glasgow down to Minot, all the way into Minnesota, oozing all the way into western Wisconsin, a level 2 out of 5 risk. Marginal risk extending on the outer borders of this slight risk. And this is basically driven off a ridge of high pressure over the western U.S. that's there today. It's been there for a while. It's kind of getting broad. And then there's just energy flying around this ridge, and with impulses of energy that, with the ingredients in the atmosphere allow for storms to develop, and then they have the opportunity to become severe. So we have a slight risk for tomorrow, sort of a bimodal 2% risk. These might kind of connect here in North Dakota, but 2% risk of a tornado here, 2% risk of a tornado in Minnesota, more so in the Montana areas of North Dakota here. Wind threat, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour in this yellow area. And then the hell threat, a bimodal 15% risk with this too. So there might be kind of two separate areas of energy that kind of gets going in this area. And we'll kind of talk more heavily on this as we get into tomorrow morning's video. But we have that, and then we get into the next day, pretty much for the same areas, but positioned a little bit further east and driven off the same thing. Energy continues around this upper ridging. It's high pressure over the western U.S., and this is just northwest flow. And you know, if you could actually draw it here, we could get some storms, you know, immediately around the high pressure, but the flow is just kind of going like this. It kind of goes like that, and then it kind of goes like this. So a lot of moisture building up into here. We got that mid-level flow right up into here, and we're going to get overlapping of conditions for severe weather. So Sunday, severe weather threat once again in the same areas. And then Monday, I want to watch for a more higher end severe weather threat from Monday. And we'll talk a little bit more about that over the weekend, but a 15% risk, which means there's a slight risk at day 4 for severe weather from Minneapolis, Green Bay, Milwaukee, Chicago, higher populated areas. So just to talk a little bit about what's driving this, and we'll get deeper into this as we go forward, but I'm not going to try to go as deep into this as I did yesterday, but kind of just cut it a little bit short so I don't bore you with the details and being repetitive. But in the areas of purple, almost pink, that's where you have mid-level flow. I use the term flow a lot. Just think of that as wind flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, the movement of air. Okay, so you got a flow in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and I'm talking about 18, 20,000 feet up in the air, moving at about 45 to 50 knots around this ridge. Okay, and you can actually see what's going on here. You got the ridge right into here. You can actually see a little bit of flow on this side. You see just a little hints of blue, and you see the wind barbs, like these wind barbs in California, kind of pointing towards the southeast. It's because the winds are coming out the southeast. Then they come out the south. Then they come out the southwest. Okay, then they come out the west. And then they begin to come out the northwest. And then this ridge sort of extends outward through here, but it's weaker. So you kind of have this extension of the ridge this way, and it gets a little bit more of a weaker influence, but you can see it. This is more you have a stronger upper ridging in place. Okay, and around these ridging features, you have flow. And you always watch for that northern flow, and typically where you have the digging of these pieces of energy along these upper troughs, or just embedded energy in this flow, when you combine the favorable kinematics, favorable upper level wind pattern in the upper levels of the atmosphere with some moisture at the surface, you get overlapping of ingredients, and then you get a shot at severe weather. And that's what's going to happen. And really you watch for it really in kind of these areas right into here, right at what we call the exit region of the mid-level jet. So that's kind of where you're going to have the severe weather threat for tomorrow. You can see that flow is just now extending into the north central U.S. Ingredients thermodynamic wise will extend into this area, and then you got a flow coming into this, and you're going to have the overlapping of ingredients. So you get that back off, and then you switch into Sunday. The flow, as the ridge kind of oozes to the east ever so slightly, begins to sort of become more zonal but extend outward more. So now, and I want to note, you see this little bulge right here? That is energy about to dive into Canada. Could have a more substantial severe weather threat, maybe up into portions of Canada, maybe Sunday. But anyways, talking about the U.S. here, you see, once again, you see these wind barbs kind of screaming out the west, and then they kind of dip out the northwest. So you got winds out the northwest. So there's your flow moving into this region. We're going to have another severe weather threat where your better thermodynamics are somewhere right into here. Okay. Now, if you're wondering, what about over here? Well, you're lacking thermodynamics over here. So just because you see flow in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere, that doesn't mean you're going to get severe weather. There's also kind of an embedded boundary that you're not seeing here unless you pull up the dew point map, really, that's separating favorable thermodynamics and with not favorable thermodynamics, dry air against very moist air to the south. So we'll show you that here in a second a little bit more. But that flow continues to extend on the northern portion of this upper ridging, and then we get into Monday, and you can see a more substantial impulse of energy right in here. You see the buckling of these isobars right in here. See how they're kind of doing like that and like that? That is a more substantial area of energy, and you can see the mid-level flow is actually increasing. It's up to 50 to 60 knots, so I mean it's rolling at about 65, 70 miles per hour, about 19,000 feet up in the air above the surface here. So you definitely have more of a favorable wind push in the upper levels of the atmosphere that's going to aid in more of a damaging wind threat, could aid in more of a tornado threat, depending on if you have like an embedded surface low that's bringing an enhanced area of better low-level winds, like your low-level jet winds a mile up in the air. So I don't want to bore you guys with the details too much. But at the same time, with this energy diving down, this upper trough that we can kind of show you better on the heights and anomalies here, but there's going to be some sort of boundary right in here. So the severe weather threat will most likely be pushed off to the south, kind of into this region for Monday. But you got to watch for some sort of low into here that's really going to enhance the severe weather threat into here. We definitely got to watch. So you can see it pretty well in the 500 millibar flow and what's going on with this. And, you know, you compare this with the thermodynamics, your higher end dew points. And, I mean, that there's going to be plenty of moisture at the surface. That's why there's a severe weather threat also somewhat for Montana tomorrow, because even though these dew points are only in the 50s and 60s, and we talk about all the time, you know, dew points in the 50s is dry air, but dew points in the 50s is supportive of severe weather a lot more in these higher elevations than it is like in the east. For example, you know, even when you're way out here in the western Dakotas, western Nebraska, and there's no mountains, and in some areas there are, but when it's even just flat, plateau, it's quite literally a plateau. You're like 5,000-6,000 feet up in the air. But our 5,000-6,000 feet up in the air, like in the southeast and the Appalachian Mountains, I mean, you're seeing mountains up here. If you don't realize, and some people don't, the further you get out west, even if you ain't seen mountains, on average, you're gradually increasing elevation, especially once you get into the central U.S. more so. And then the elevation begins to increase. So you don't need as much moist air and higher elevations to get severe weather. We'll just leave it at that. So we get into Saturday afternoon, pool of very moist air. And this is the European model, not the HRRR model, but very moist pool of air up here in the upper sections of the Midwest. So you're definitely going to have that. Plus that little mid-level flow riding over this, so you have the overlapping of ingredients for severe weather. Okay, and then you keep this going, and we get into our Sunday. What I want you to notice is some of this favorable low-level moisture begins to kind of get chopped off a little bit to the north. It's not much, but it's there. But in general, same basic setup from Saturday to Sunday into areas of the upper Midwest. You know, this pool of moist air doesn't move much. Now you get into Monday, this is when it could potentially change a little bit. You still got very moist air up in kind of the same areas, but I want you to watch the last couple of frames. Watch this area as your moist levels begin to drop. So that is your upper energy diving down into here with probably an embedded cold front about to sweep through this area. How fast is this feature up here in Canada is going to dive down for Monday? How fast is it going to move into the area? How slow is it going to move? I think that will tell the tale for severe weather. The Euro has it moving a little bit slow, which means this would probably bring more of a severe weather threat into Minnesota and Wisconsin also. But if you compare it to, well, it shows pretty much severe weather into that area. I thought it was a little bit further south. So it's actually right on it. This actually makes perfect sense for Monday. 15% risk of severe weather here. If you compare that with the dew point map, plenty of mid-level flow riding over this area. Plenty of kinematics. Check that off the box. Pool of very moist air still in place. But this is what I'm talking about that embedded boundary. See how the cold front pushes through, clears out the air mass somewhat, and then you dry out for these areas. Dew points drop into the 50s, low 60s. A little bit more comfortable air for your Tuesday afternoon. But what is going to be the timing of that upper feature? That's a big question. And I think right now they got this pretty dead on when you compare that for Monday. I mean, look at that enhanced flow right over this region. And then you compare the dew points for Monday. We'll back it up here. So you got dew points in the 70s in the 70s across this area of the upper Midwest with 40 to 50 knots mid-level jet right in with this area, even more. But remember, there's a boundary somewhere here in the upper portion of Minnesota, maybe Wisconsin. And if you do take an early look at that 850 millibar jet, the low-level jet in this area, what does that look like for Monday? It's a big question. You see that low-level flow, kind of embedded pockets. It looks very weird. But there is that lower-level flow, which you look more so for a more substantial wind threat and a tornado threat. So as we get a little bit closer to this, okay, you got this upper low diving down with an embedded, probably shortwave trough or some sort of surface low. That's when we really start to zoom in on kind of the lower level features wind-wise. And we'll get a little bit closer to that as we move throughout the weekend. But I can see Monday being a more, quite literally, an enhanced risk. So I always say I won't spend so much time on that. I always end up doing it anyway. So, but the National Hurricane Center update, they've dropped this to a 0% chance to develop. But they do still have a little X on the screen. Beryl is now off the screen. We officially have said completely goodbye to that as it's vanished, evaporated into the air. But you notice you don't see anything else out there. It's quiet, and I do have a look here at the European Ensemble, which makes up 51 runs, and it's pretty quiet. This is between now and the next 10 days. It's quiet. Just a little couple scraggler members out here, but there's no sign of anything anytime soon in the tropics. And this is the break we were expecting. The dry Saharan dust is dominating the Atlantic basin, and it's going to be quiet. So, like I said, I've said this a few times throughout the week, not trying to overhype anything, but I do think that once we start again, guys, we might not stop. I mean, we'll have a little breaks here and there, but I got a feeling that we're at least going to have something out there to talk about for maybe weeks on end, maybe from late summer all the way through early fall, mid-fall. A month that's been kind of quiet the last couple years is October. The last super active October we had was 2020. I don't know I know you guys along the Gulf Coast got to remember 2020. That was just ridiculous how many hurricanes hit, but let's hope it's nothing like that. But the last few years has been pretty quiet with October. I mean, we did have Ian that hit the last couple of days of September, made a secondary landfall the last day of September into South Carolina, but it really pretty much quieted down after that. So, that's always a wild card month too. Very wild card. So we'll continue to figure this one out. Thank you all for the people who continue to be loyal to the channel, tune in when things aren't even active. I know it's going to be probably a slow grind over the next few weeks, but the break has been nice this week. Going to continue to enjoy the slower times. God bless all y'all. Y'all have a wonderful Friday. Great start to your weekend. And I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. God bless.